Bring me the 4 weapons. The weapons of Spinjitzu will be mine!
I have built all of the 4 golden weapons of Ninjago, but there is one problem. I can't wield them all at the same time, because last time I looked I didn't have 4 arms. But I think I know how to solve that. Let's make a Garmadon costume. So I cut out that it's time to paint. Oh no, I ran out of glue. There are a lot of different parts that I need to make it. First I need 2 more arms, so I will have to figure out how to make those. Then I need some sort of mask, his helmet, some armor pieces and a few extra details. So let's get started. I think the most important thing is to get the mask and the face right.
You're quite right. It is.
So let's make that first. I started by looking up the measurements of a minifigure head to make sure it looks right. But I also had to make sure it fits my head at the same time.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So with the scale decided, I started by sketching out circles of a few different sizes. When I then had cut them all out, it was time to start putting together the main structure of the head. The rounded edges at the bottom and top of a minifigure head I made by cutting a bunch of quarter circles and gluing them around the edge of the main circle. I then added a smaller circle as extra support and cut out a hole where my head would go. To add some strength, I added a bunch of tall pieces to support the outer cardboard layer later. When I had cut it in half to make 2 half circles, I started putting together the top of the head with the Lego stud and everything. With the parts done and glued together, I could test fit the head. After I had tested it, I noticed that
There's a slight design flaw.
to fix it, I cut out some pieces to make it fit my head a little better. And I also built a head-shaped thing similar to what I have done on my Spider-Man masks, so that the minifigure head will be held in place on my head. With the base structure done, I started wrapping it with the cardboard to make the outer layer. Then I decided to print out a huge Garmadon face to measure where the facial details and eyes would go. With it all measured out, I could cut out the holes for the eyes where you would be looking out. Then to smooth out some of the edges, I used a bunch of tape pieces before it was time for the first layer of paint. While the head was drying, I decided to start making some minifigure gloves for my real hands, because I think it would look weird to have a minifigure head with normal human hands. I guess Garmadon is a bit weird though.
Stop being weird.
Anyway, I decided to use cardboard for these two, so I first cut out some hand-shaped pieces and then some long rectangles that I bent a bit in order to glue them to the edges of the hand-shaped pieces. With the hands glued together, I cut out a hole for my hand and attached a band so I could connect the golden weapons to the hand later. And then of course I painted them black. While the hands dry, I started to cut out the bone pieces that Garmadon has on his torso. For this I used some cardboard that already had that kind of warm looking white color that old bones have. And with them all cut out, I glued them in the correct order to some black fabric that I could wear around my neck like a big necklace.
Look, check it out!
Now with the bones done, it's time to start making the 2 extra arms. These are probably going to be quite a challenge though, because they have to look like real arms, they have to move like real arms, and they somehow have to attach to my body and to my real arms, so that they can follow the movement of my arms. I have some ideas on how to get the arms to do all that, but before I can get to the arms, I need to quickly make 2 more hands. With the hands done, I took some cardboard roll and cut them to a good length for the arms, before then gluing them to the hands. However, I can't just have some sticks as arms, so I need to find a way to make the arms bend and be able to move. The arms need to have 2 points of movement, one where they attach to my body and one for the elbow of the arms. These joints need to be strong enough to hold up the weight of the arms with the weapons attached to the hands, and also not break when you swing around the arms for a long time. So they need to be pretty strong but also flexible, which is a bit of a challenge. And I found this grey tape that was quite thick and would hold up well when being bent around like crazy. So I wrapped a bunch of tape together into a cylinder shape that I then glued together with some cardboard and rolled together. Then to reinforce the joint, I added some elastic bands, and for the elbow I used some more tape on one of the sides to limit the angle and direction the arm was able to move. With the joints done, I attached a string to test the movement a bit. and it worked pretty well. So now I only need to finish the 2 arms and somehow make them look a bit better. With 1 arm done, I need to find some parts for the other arm.
How about this one? Oh man, to have a sword arm, that'd be sweet.
When I had found the actual materials for the other arm, I just built it the same as the first arm, but mirrored. This time I added a bit of a different band to the handle. This was to really make sure that it would hold the sticks of the nunchucks together well when the arm gets swung around. Now with the base structure of the 2 arms put together, I need something to connect them to my body. So I found a good piece of black fabric, cut it and glued it a bit before attaching some velcro so that it could be worn as a belt. When I had tested it and made sure it fit me well, I glued on the arms and tested the whole thing with the 2 arms.
At first I was like totally freaked out.
But the arms worked really well. The arms moved along with my real arms exactly as I intended. So now it was time to do something with these sticks for arms. With some working out, with some healthy food and cardboard of course, we now have 2 big and muscular arms. So now we finally can
Hold all 4 Spinjitzu weapons.
To finish off the arms, I added some fabric around the part that I would wear around my wrist. Then I painted the arms with a quick layer of black paint before gluing fabric around the whole arm to make it look a bit like a shirt. The important thing when I was wrapping around the fabric was that I didn't limit any of the arm's movement, so I had to leave a little extra fabric at parts so that the arm still could bend around. For the most part I managed to do it pretty well, but the fabric got a bit twisted at some parts, which made it a bit harder to move the arm.
The second design flaw!
But it still worked pretty well. And of course, Garmadon can still do his
Sick dark ninja moves.
By now the first layer of paint had dried on the head, so it's time to add Garmadon's face. I wanted to make his face really smooth and not have a cardboard texture all over it. So I found a big piece of thin cardboard from some Lego instructions that I could use to smooth out the front of his head. This separate piece of cardboard will also make it easier to sketch out and put on all of the facial details in the correct spot. So let's cut out all of those. The printed Garmadon face made it quite easy to measure out the size and shape of the different lines on Garmadon's face. For the eyebrows though, I wanted to add a bit more detail. So I cut the edges with some more angles in them, and I even decided to add some fabric on top to give them a bit more texture. Now with all the details done, I just have to give them a bit of paint before gluing them to the face. That will have to wait until I've gotten the armor and helmet finished too though, so I can paint everything at the same time. For now though, I can at least glue the thin cardboard to the front of the head and give the head another layer of paint. While I wait for that paint to dry, I can finally start with Garmadon's armor.
What took you so long?
I want to capture the classic Season 1 look of Garmadon with the grey armor and the helmet, but add some newer elements to add some extra details. So I cut out a bunch of cardboard pieces and tested some different ways of layering them, until I found that it looked really cool if you bent them on a bit of an angle and cut off some of the corners. So when I was happy with the look of the armor, I taped off all the edges and glued it all together. Now, something that the classic Garmadon doesn't have is shoulder pads, but shoulder pads are just so cool, so I decided to make some. I took some inspiration from both how real samurai shoulder pads look and how the movie Garmadon's shoulder pads look, and came up with something a bit in between that I thought looked really cool. With armor parts complete and ready to paint, it's time to start on the classic helmet, so Garmadon can take control of the skeleton army.
I think there'll be some changes in management around here.
I started with just making a simple Lego anti-stud that would connect with the stud on the top of the Garmadon head. From there I took a bunch of cardboard pieces and shaped them around the head to make sure that the helmet would fit nicely. When I had put together the base shape of the helmet, I started adding some inner support pieces that would also help me shape the back of the helmet. For the overall look of the helmet, I went for the classic Lego helmet, since it's already pretty detailed and it will look good together with the minifigure head. When I had gotten all the pieces glued to the back, I started with the front of the helmet. This was actually a bit tricky because of the weird shape at the front. When the front pieces were glued in, I started on the clip thing at the top of the helmet where the bone would attach. For this piece I wrote together some cardboard. Then to fix the sides, I cut out some horseshoe shaped pieces and glued them on before putting tape around all the edges and attaching the thing to the top of the helmet. Speaking of the top of the helmet, it's time to finish that. However, I realized I was running really low on glue sticks.
You have got to be kidding me.
So I guess I have to go on a bit of a side quest to the store before finishing the helmet. When I had filled up the glue supply, I finished up the top of the helmet by adding a bunch of support pieces and cutting out some big round cardboard pieces that I bent around the top of the helmet. Making round shapes with cardboard is usually quite tricky, but it went surprisingly well.
Nailed it.
So when I had put tape around the whole thing, the helmet was done and it was time to start on the last part of the Garmadon costume. I started by copy pasting a 3D model of the bone from a Lego building program and then smoothing it out in Blender. When the bone pieces were being printed, I rolled together some cardboard until it fit perfectly in the clip on the top of the helmet. After a few hours of printing the bone parts, they were finally done, so I could sand them a ton, just like I did with all the golden weapons, and then glue the pieces to the cardboard cylinder. Now with everything built, it's time for the most important step.
The karate skills. The misos. Or the chainsaw. Or the dance of doom.
No, not some weird ninja moves. Painting all the parts, of course. When I had found all the paint cans that I needed, I started with a base layer of silver paint. For the big bone, I of course just used primer and then some normal white paint. The face details I only sprayed with primer though, because the primer is already the perfect grey color. After waiting for a few minutes until the helmet and armor pieces had dried a bit, I got some of my graphite powder that I've used on my Mandalorian helmet and Iron Man suit to get a darker grey metallic look.
Well, here's something you won't learn in school.
Graphite is actually what is in normal pencils, and you might have noticed that if you rub in the graphite you get a really shiny surface, which is exactly what I'm doing. I just use quite a bit more, and now with the clear coat on, the painting process is done, so I will just have to wait a bit for it to dry. Once the parts had dried, I took the face details and started gluing them to the head. Most of them I glued on directly or painted some extra details on, but I wanted the eyebrows to be able to move, so that Garmadon's face can have some different expressions. In order to make the eyebrows be able to move, I had to make some sort of simple mechanism, so I took some small wood sticks and cut them super short before gluing them to some buttons. These pieces will hold the eyebrows in place, but also let them rotate a bit. With the pieces done, I found a good spot on the head to make a hole, and then I put in the pieces from behind and glued on the eyebrows from the front. Then to finish off the face, I just needed to make the eyes red, and I had just the perfect thing for that.
Look at this.
When I layer some of this red fabric with holes, you can see quite well through it if you're close, but from afar it just looks red. I can't just glue some red fabric on the inside of the mask though, so I cut out and glued on some small white dots to the front of the eyes. And with that, the eyes and the whole mask was done. Now there are just some smaller things to get done before it's all finished. You know, stuff with
Some pizzazz.
When I looked around for good materials for the costume, I found a ton of random black buttons that I thought would add some nice detail to the costume. So with a bunch of those glued to the helmet and armor, cut and glued some bands to connect the armor pieces and shoulder pads, as well as covering the big bone with brown paint to make it look a bit old. Guess what? After a ton of work, the costume is finally complete. And I guess it's time to steal some golden weapons. Wearing the costume was awesome. And wielding almost all of the godly weapons is definitely just as cool as you imagine it to be.
Oh, really?
This is definitely one of the coolest costumes I made. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I wonder what it would be like to wield all the godly weapons though. But I guess Garmadon has a ninja to take care of before he can do that.
Good and evil. There has always been a balance. I shall destroy it, and all who stand in my way.